Maybe in all of this, Vladimir Putin thinks his quest to take back the Russian Empire puts him in the same category as Peter the Great. But when we watch as this ruthless battle unfolds, Putin is looking more and more like Ivan the Terrible, the Russian tyrant who conquered vast amounts of land, killed lots of people, and eventually lost his mind. In an op-ed, my next guest writes this: the more of the country Putin tries to seize, the more resistance he will face. If he tries to seize the whole thing, then he risks igniting an even greater conflict. Perhaps in the coming days, the question of crazy will be answered. Arthur Douglas Murray joins me now. So, do you think he's crazy, or are we about to find out?
I think we're about to find out. It's been always a discussion for more than 20 years with Vladimir Putin. I cite in that op-ed in the New York Post a conversation that Condoleezza Rice had about 8 years ago, where she recalled one of her last meetings with Putin, who said to her, "You know us, you know that we always need a strong man. You know, Alexander II, Peter the Great," and she said she wondered whether he had Vladimir the Great there somewhere in his mind. And she said then, in I think 2014, she said, there is a 5% chance that he's not rational at all. Now, of course, the problem with Putin is, in one way, what he's doing by his own lights is entirely rational. He laments the loss of the Soviet Union. He believes that he should be able to put it together. He pretends that Ukraine isn't a country, which it is. He pretends it's a sort of invention and that he can just roll into it and murder the citizens until he gets his way. And by his own lights, in a way, that's rational. But in another way, of course, it isn't at all. Because it's perfectly possible that what Vladimir Putin is doing is a massive overreach for him, for the Russian armed forces, for the Russian economy, for the Russian people. None of them need this. None of them need the Russian economy tanking. None of them need these further rounds of sanctions and the loss of hundreds, perhaps thousands of Russian troops in the Ukraine. But that's one of the things that's possible, as it is possible that he fails in his mission. So as I say, this question of is he actually rational or not may well be answered in the coming days.
It'll be answered when we see how the siege at the Capitol plays out. If he does this strategically, surrounds it, squeezes Zelensky, maybe forces him to a negotiating table somewhere, and then just gets concession after concession, that would make me think he's rational. But if he goes in bloodthirsty and puts a bullet in this guy's head,
yes,
in front of the entire world, that tells me this guy's sick in the head and we're dealing with a maniac. Do you agree?
Yes, I do, and there's other signals to that. I mean, his absolutely deranged speech from the Kremlin this week, he gave a totally fantastical version of history, just filled with falsehoods that only Vladimir Putin can believe. You know, he's been holed up in the Kremlin for the last 2 years trying to dodge COVID. He has a greater fear of COVID than Queen Elizabeth II at the age of 95. He doesn't allow anyone within 40 feet of him. Visitors have to be detained for weeks beforehand and then sprayed with chemicals before meeting him. But I wouldn't trust the chemicals the Kremlin sprays. But you know, so he's been in this isolation. He gave this speech filled with just mad versions of history. But here was one of the worrying things. It was also, of course, blood-curdling. These threats he's made about outside forces if they dare to step in. These were blood-curdling threats from Vladimir Putin. He's coming up to the age of 70. There's all sorts of rumors about his health. He seems to think perhaps that this is his legacy. But there's an enormous amount of pain coming for him and everybody else if he pursues this path. Your previous guest quite understandably referred to the Baltic states, and here we get into real trouble, because it's true that the whole debate about Ukraine and whether or not they should be or not be in NATO has been a very tricky issue for the Europeans for many years now. But of course the Baltic states are in NATO. If they were to be threatened, if they were to be, let alone invaded by Vladimir Putin, Article 5 of the NATO treaty demands that all of NATO come in and defend those countries. At that point, of course, we get into a whole different scenario. That's a World War scenario.
Yeah, and you don't know how unstable he is, because he seemed to suggest that he was willing to use nuclear weapons if anybody interfered in this conquest, which really changes the calculation. All right, Douglas Murray, thank you so much.
It's a great pleasure.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.